welcome everyone to the third in our series of virtual workshops. And this one is Bluegrass Vocals. Everyone is a singer, the voice as instrument, led by Dede Wyland. This workshop is brought to you by IBMA's Leadership Bluegrass Alumni Committee. My name is Lee Stivers, and I'm co-chair of that committee along with Michelle Gorley. I want to mention that we will be continuing this series of workshops over the next couple of months. Whoops, here we go. The March 13th workshop, which is next, is Mentoring Reimagined, a key to connection, community, and legacy building. And that's led by Louisa Branscombe and several guests of hers. On April 16th, we will have a workshop entitled Finding Peace, Music as a Wayfinder for Grief and Loss. And that will be led by Chris Digman and Michelle Gorley. So stay tuned for details on those workshops. Before I introduce Dede and turn things over to her and her guests, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping things. This workshop is being recorded and will be posted shortly on IBMA's YouTube channel. Your mics should all be muted throughout the presentations, but we do encourage you to type questions and comments into the chat, and we'll have some time at the end for question and answer. You're all Zoom experts at this point, but I will just mention that you might want to choose the speaker view in the top right corner of your Zoom screen for the best viewing for this. We don't have panelists pinned to the screen. So I want to introduce Dede Wyland, who is, among other things, an alumni of Leadership Bluegrass, class of 2016, which is, I will say, a darn good class. Milwaukee-born singer and guitarist Dede Wyland's 1980 through 1987 work with Tony Trischka and Skyline brought her international acclaim and made her a role model and an artistic influence for a generation of female bluegrass musicians. Dede is an 11-time winner of the Washington Area Music Association's Bluegrass Singer of the Year Award, and she has her own chapter in Murphy Henry's 2013 book, Pretty Good for a Girl, Women in Bluegrass. That's an award. That's an award right there. Since moving to the Washington-Baltimore area in 1990, Dede has established herself as a sought-after vocal coach, and she teaches privately as well as at music camps around the country. She has a 12-part video school of voice that is on Peghead Nation, and we'll show the link for that later in the presentation. She has 2 solo recordings through Patuxent Music, The Urge for Going, and Keep the Light On. Dede, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Lee. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our 2 other distinguished panelists. And first of all, Daniel Bonner is a multi-instrumentalist and the director of Bluegrass, Old Time and Roots Music Studies at East Tennessee State University, where he teaches private vocal and instrumental instruction, a senior level recording capstone course, and leads the program's renowned ETSU Bluegrass Pride Band. Also, his Bluegrass Old Time and Roots Music program will be hosting its very first summer camp for kids and teens this summer, ages 11 through 19, to be held on campus July 8th through the 12th of 2024. He is a former guitar player for the Becky Buller Band and singer. And in 2019, he released his solo project, West of West Virginia. He also has a large family of pets, including Baby Bird, the Amazon parrot, and what was his name?
Atticus Finch, the pot-bellied pig.
Atticus Finch, the pot-bellied pig. So please make welcome Dan Bonner.
Thank you, Dede. I also want to say, 2016 was probably the best leadership bluegrass class ever, as we like to say, because Lee and Dede and I were all part of the 2016 class. I believe it was the 2016 class, right?
It was, yes.
And I distinctly remember throwing bean bags at Dede Wyland.
Which I very happily received and threw back. Okay. And then moving on to the next gentleman. Stephen Mougin is a man who wears many hats. Stephen is best known as the guitarist and lead singer of the Sam Bush Band and is a sought-after instructor. In addition to the Sam Bush Band, he is one half of Nedski and Mojo, a long-running duo with 2018 International Bluegrass Music Association Banjo Player of the Year, Ned Lubrecki. Stephen is also an award-winning producer, engineer, a label head, mentor, songwriter, band coach, and so much more. Please make welcome Stephen Mougin.
Thank you all. Very nice to be here. Thanks to Dede for asking. I remember the first time I met Dede, I was doing a vocal workshop in Maryland on a Nedski and Mojo gig, and I look up and there's Dede Wyland sitting in my class, and that was just a little intimidating. So it's been a nice friendship and a lot of mutual respect.
Indeed, indeed. So I'm very happy. We are all very happy to be here today and anxious to talk about this subject that means so much to us. One of our primary goals today is to raise awareness around the fact that the voice is an instrument. Yes, the voice is an instrument, and that we understand the voice better and learn through vocal technique, just the same way that we use techniques to learn the guitar, banjo, mandolin, fiddle, etc. We all feel that learning the fundamentals of good singing should be equally represented and available at camps, workshops, and festivals. And an important thing that we want to do is dispel the idea that learning technique ruins your voice in any way whatsoever. It does nothing but enhance your voice. And so that's our first topic today. What we'd like to do is raise awareness around the fact that the voice is an instrument, that we improve our singing by learning vocal technique the same way, like I said, we learn technique to play the guitar, banjo, mandolin, etc. So before I pull you in with your thoughts, I just want to say one other thing. And that is that vocal technique alone does not make a great singer. What it does is free us from the physical limitations that stand in the way of our ability to fully express ourselves through song. So vocal technique bridges the gap between what we can feel and what we're able to express. So, Stephen, do you want to please say something about raising awareness around the voice as an instrument?
Sure. My degree is in vocal music education. I went to college, studied, classical music education, the whole 9 yards. Dan and I have very similar backgrounds in that respect. And what I learned in the third or fourth week of college, I will tell this anecdotally. I was studying classical voice, and my instructor was about 4 feet tall, 75 years old when I started as a freshman, and full of, let's say, opinion. She was a wonderful lady, but very, very clear with what she was talking about and what she expected of everyone. A couple, 3 weeks into lessons, I came in on a Monday morning and started my vocal warm-up, and she stopped me immediately. She said, "What are you doing on the weekend, which is ruining everything we're working on?" And I said, "Well, I'm, playing gigs with my bluegrass band." So she said, "All right, next week, bring your guitar in and let's figure out how we can use good technique, but apply it to bluegrass vocals." She said, "I don't want to change your style, but let's figure out an easier way to do that." And I was really lucky to have a vocal instructor that was so open to different genres of music. And because there are rules you need to kind of break in order to do what we do and make it sound authentic. But I would say, 80%, 90% of everything we're doing is right in line with classical vocal technique. you've got to breathe. You've got to make sure you're nice and relaxed. You've got to make vowel shapes in certain ways. But we also want it to sound like the style of music we're familiar with. So I would just say that it took me a long time to kind of marry the two. And I still, to this day, go back to my vocal technique. When something isn't working, especially, I'll go back to the classical technique stuff and really work through some things and figure out what I'm doing wrong. Quite often with me, I'm clenching my jaw.
Right. And I might add that you can think of a vocal technique as the trunk of a tree. There are fundamentals in understanding how to sing that are very basic to all genres of singing. And so these fundamentals are the trunk of the tree, which is breath support, how to breathe, a little bit of posture, how to get rid of tension in the voice. These are all fundamental things of the trunk. And then beyond the trunk, above the trunk are the branches. And so that's where, there's the classical music sound or the blues sound or the Tibetan throat singing sound, whatever. But the fundamentals are the same. And so just to assure people who have questions about this, those fundamentals apply to all singing. And that's what you would want to learn through any good singing teacher or a classical music teacher too. It's just the fundamentals. Right. Dan, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, my background is very similar to Stephen's, except I can't remember a time when I wasn't around bluegrass. I grew up in southern New Jersey, where a lot of people moved from Appalachia. So my dad's family was from West Virginia. They played and sang music. I went to a Free Will Baptist church, and it was, small attendance. There were 4 Free Will Baptist churches within 10 minutes of each other. And everybody there was from Newport, Tennessee, and Kentucky and the mountains. And so I grew up playing and singing at Saturday night sing-ins, just learning all of the old stuff. And it was part of worship. And of course, in the Free Will Baptist Church, there's a great deal of emotion. It kind of lives somewhere between Baptist and Pentecostal, right in the middle there. And so there were a lot of singers that just really put it out there. Great harmony singers. When I was 7 years old, I was playing guitar in the Shining Lights, which was a group of family members that sang together. Gosh, they sounded so good and so authentic. That word is problematic, but authentic to me. I didn't want to sing, though, when I was young. I sang a few times, and too many people gave me the smiley, oh, look at the cute kid face. And so I quit singing until I was in high school. And I kind of resisted any sort of formal training. I learned knee to knee with Cecil West, who taught me how to play fiddle and flat pick the guitar. My Uncle Larry, who taught me how to play the chords. And I just resisted. I didn't like the restriction of you have to do it this way and you have to learn to read music. And, I would respond and say, well, people who read can't play because all you're doing is mechanically looking at a black note on a page and you're putting your finger there. That's not music. But as I got to high school and started expanding my mind a little bit, and I decided that I wanted to go into music education. I went to ETSU because they have this wonderful program here in bluegrass, old time and roots music. And at the same time, I joined the ETSU chorale. And under Tom Jenrette, who I just absolutely love, we met every single day of the week, 5 days a week, rehearsing with the chorale. The first year we performed at the Vatican, St. Mark's in Venice. The next year at the White House, Harvard University. I mean, we were playing some really nice places, singing some really nice places. And also my Chinese voice teacher, Dr. Si Yin Lo, who also, taught me one-on-one, and he didn't understand bluegrass. He's like, "What is this bluegrass stuff?" And so I had to explain it to him, and he tried to get me and some of the other bluegrass singers to not be as nasal, to use good vocal production as we were singing, and to find our own voice. I will say that taking voice lessons with a good teacher will make you a better critical listener. Stephen and I, we both work in the recording studio a lot, and we produce vocalists. We record a lot of vocalists, and when you have worked in a choir or with a voice teacher who has concentrated on consonants and syllables and cutoffs and tone and blend and tuning and intonation and all of these things, when you get in the recording studio, those things become magnified under a microscope. And so I know it's helped me as a producer because of being a more critical listener. And of myself, a lot of times, if I haven't played a lot, I'll find something to sing along to. I'll put on a karaoke track of something, and just in my room, I'll set up a mic and I'll just sing to it over and over and just keep myself warmed up and listen back and, oh gosh, I was out of tune there. Didn't pronounce that the way I wanted to, and make decisions about how I want to sound.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that should bring us to some of the anecdotes that we have about some of the older generation bluegrass musicians who you wouldn't think necessarily thought about the voice, but who did. And so, Dan, you were talking about, what was your story about Larry Sparks?
Oh, yeah. 5 or 6 years ago, Larry was being honored here locally with a ACMA award. And most everybody was either out on stage or they were backstage doing stuff. It was kind of quiet backstage. And I came down the hallway to where in this performing arts center, there was like a set design area where they have saws and drill presses and stuff. And I heard Larry, and I kind of peeked my head in there, and there was Larry with his guitar, and he was going exactly like this. He was going, I wonder if it's raining in the mountains. And he's practicing Tennessee 1949, like syllable by syllable. And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't think Larry had to practice. I thought he just got on stage and was Larry Sparks. And so I walked up to him. I said, Larry, you practicing your singing? And he, in his Larry Sparks kind of way, just said, you never get too old or too good to practice.
Right, exactly. And I have also, Dan, before I go into my story, you had talked about the Osborne brothers and how you read, I believe, that they had to work together to learn how to shape their vowels the same way. I mean, it's all a part of thinking of the voice and the instrument, thinking about the instrument and shaping your vowels so that the sounds sound the same. And that's one of the reasons they had, aside from the fact that they were brothers, that they had such a great sound. They formed the vowels the same way. But
yeah, Dede, I would say a really great book that has some good interviews with singers is Pete Wernick's Red Songbook from back in the late 70s or early 80s, whenever he put that out. And he talks to Bill Monroe and to the Osbournes, Jim and Jesse, about how they go about singing. And that's where I read that at.
Yes, that is a great book. And actually, I got another story from that same book. And in that book, Pete Wernick was interviewing Peter Rowan. And Rowan was talking about how Monroe taught him how to hit some high notes. So in the song, Sweetheart of Mine, Can't You Hear Me Calling? There's the phrase that goes, a million times I love you best. And what he taught Pete Rowan is that the word times has an I vowel. And if you say I, you'll feel that the back of your throat closes. And so what Monroe told Peter Rowan was that you have to shape an ah. This is right in the book. He says you have to shape an ah, say ah, ah, and that opens your throat. That's a vowel modification. That's straight technique, but Monroe had his own words for it. So instead of a million times, he put an ah shape in it, and it was a million times, right? And it opened up his throat and was much easier for him to sing it. And that's technique directly from Bill Monroe.
Yeah, and he talked in other interviews about learning that in the singing schools around Rosine, Kentucky, where, they would, he'd go to those falsetto notes, but he'd open real big, and there's, gosh, so many pictures and videos of Bill's, with his mouth wide open. Vowel modification.
What exactly? I would like to backtrack just a little bit before we get too far from this. But one of the things that we want to do today that's very important to us is to raise awareness around the fact that the voice is an instrument, as I said, that the voice is an instrument and that there are techniques to learn how to sing the voice with more ease and with more quality, tone quality, etc. And so that is one point. The other point we want to make is that we want to bring awareness around the fact that we need to have more vocals singing represented at camps and festivals and workshops, and there is some representative of vocal technique and bluegrass singing at these places, but not enough. It's not nearly equal. And when you think about it, singing lives at the heart of bluegrass music, and it's the centerpiece of all bluegrass songs. So this is an important fact, and so if there are any festival promoters out there or people who are involved in the educational part of bluegrass instrumentation, we want to encourage you to make room for learning to sing at your different events. And maybe I'll cap this thought off with a story that I have, which is that many years ago, I was asked to judge the Winter Hawk band contest, which is now Gray Fox. So there were about 100 entries. And so the judges, we all listened to all of these songs, and we ended up with maybe 10 bands. And the one thing that these 10 bands had in common is that they had worked on their vocals, and they had strong vocals. Most of the other bands had great instrumentation, but the singing was kind of an afterthought. So I guess my point here is that that's what we want to change. Because singing is not an afterthought. It's central to bluegrass music. Okay. Let's see here. So Stephen, you were saying something about the financial aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of making technique more available.
I understand that we're kind of preaching to the choir here, because literally and metaphorically, because you're all here because you're interested in voice as an instrument. But I would encourage any promoters, even fans talking to promoters, to try to include more vocal components to camps, workshops, your local festivals. When I go out with Ned, we always try to do workshops in the afternoon, concert in the evening on a lot of shows. And Ned, amazing banjo player, always has a group of banjo players that come out to his, and I try to do a vocal workshop. A lot of promoters that we work with want me to do a guitar workshop, which is fine, and that I do that occasionally, but I prefer voice. I enjoy teaching voice more, and I've found that I always get more students. And except for one occasion, every single time Ned and I have done simultaneous workshops, I usually have at least twice as many students as he does because I get the partners of whoever he has, plus all the folks that wanted to come just for voice. So there is a financial component to digging into voice as one of the outlets that that you might present at your next thing. So I strongly suggest, and I will say that the one time that I swung and missed was when the whole workshop process was set up by a banjo company. So he had 30 banjo students. There was one voice person, and the voice person reached out and said, "Well, you know, if it's just me, have a nice night off." So it was perfect. It was great. It was a nice evening. But I do encourage that. There is a lot of desire for learning how to sing. Unfortunately, in a lot of public education, choir directors of old would want to present their greatest choir, and a lot of folks have done some damage to the psyche of folks wanting to sing, and I hate that. I was told in elementary, I was kicked out of elementary choir, and I never have run into that person again, but
Please tell us what happened.
I don't even know. I don't remember the whole scope of it. I was probably talking or something. Who knows? But I know a lot of people that I've taught over the years at different camps have come very sheepishly to the class and were told somewhere along the line that they couldn't sing or they shouldn't sing, and I say hooey to all of that. If you can talk, you can sing. Now, how well you can sing, that's what we're here to talk about. But I believe singing is for everybody, and encourage you to keep up your pursuit of that. There's space for all of us.
Indeed, there is space for all of us. And you had made a point that there's a lot of you out there who are singing and you're singing well. But, with a little bit more knowledge, you can sing even better. I don't think that you ever stop growing as a singer. I guess that's true for all the bluegrass instruments is, you can always be learning things. You can always be growing. Speaking for myself, I definitely am still learning things all the time. And so really the study of voice can be very exciting and fulfilling in an ongoing way. All right.
One of the things that I recommend is to find, if there's a camp in your area, try to head out and catch some vocal education there. But most areas have some colleges, universities. There are voice teachers in your area somewhere, and if you approach them with the idea that you want to learn specific things like how to breathe, how to produce tone, those basic foundational things, you can get that from just about any voice teacher who knows what they're doing. And I strongly suggest that to any of the folks that come out to my workshops in camps who want to further their study, because there's nothing like taking lessons every week with somebody, and especially someone who can be in the room with you. The online stuff is great, but it's nowhere near like someone standing in the room with you and you can feel what they are doing when they're making a tone. It's not convoluted over the mic and over the internet. And there's some basic posture things and all that kind of stuff. And with voice, there are some general things that you can do. And once you get to a certain point, we all have our own little idiosyncrasies of ways that we've learned to speak in different areas of the world, different ways that we crunch our face up, that we add tension to places that don't need it. We all have our own little things. So once you get to a certain level, you really do need one-on-one. A group lesson will only get you so far because some people are using too much force and other people are too timid and so on and so forth. And the things that you'd say to that student would be vastly different. And what I say to anybody that is taking voice lessons, my job is mostly a psychologist. I'm here to kind of help you get through whatever is keeping you from being a good singer. And the more we dig into the artistry of singing, which I know we're going to talk about in just a minute, but that comes into play even more. Trying to figure out what means something to you and what a song means to you and why that's important and why you need to share that. And that deep down connection, that really can help unlock some of the things that some of us clamp down on. And I'm speaking for myself as well. We are all kind of growing at this. And every day I step behind a microphone, I feel like it's day one again sometimes.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Well said. So this conversation is leading us to the next point that we have here, which is how to find your own voice. What does that mean? And how to find your style. Well, what I like to say is the first thing you have to do, and I'll say this first, is that everybody that I know who has become a competent musician or singer in bluegrass music has gone through a period where they have listened and listened and listened intently and passionately and immersed themselves in the style. And that goes for singing, so there's no shortcut in that sense. We have to, the way that we become familiar with a genre, and in this particular case with singing within the bluegrass genre, is to listen and immerse yourself and listen carefully, really tune in. And so I suggest this is the part that helps you to understand the bluegrass sound and bluegrass style singing. But let me turn it back over to you, Stephen, because I know you have something
Yeah.
about this.
I've got a couple different thoughts on this. One is an active listening technique, which I would encourage you to write notes on this. This is something that I kind of discovered in college as I was trying to figure some things out, and I've shared it with a lot of folks, and it's not rocket science, and once I say it, it's perfectly obvious, but nobody actually does it. So first step is get a nice set of headphones, any sort of isolated, so you can really hear what's going on. Alone, quiet space, pen and paper. Yes, I'm old-fashioned in that regard. I think pen and paper is actually the way to do this. Pick any song in the bluegrass genre and listen to it from the top down. And what you're going to do on the left side, you're going to write intro, verse, chorus, whatever the structure of that song is. The first time down, you're just going to sort of listen to figure out what the order of the song is. This is an ear training technique. So the second thing you're going to do is pick one instrument and follow it from the beginning to the end of the song and write notes about what it does. Okay, the bass is playing low register here, but then on the second half of the chorus, they go up to an upper part. Track that down. What is the banjo doing? When are they playing lead, backup, chopping, whatever the case may be? And do that for each of the instruments and each of the vocals. Figure out what everybody's doing and really dig into what makes that sound of that song work, how it's put together. And do that for a few songs, do maybe one a day for a while, because it's going to take you a minute to do that. But if you can immerse yourself so much in a tune, it really helps you understand how things go together. Then the next step past that, which speaks to you finding your own style. Any of my students, I always suggest if you're learning a tune from the bluegrass repertoire, listen to at least 5 different versions of that. And I don't mean 5 versions of Bill Monroe singing Mule Skinner Blues. I mean 5 different singers. Some of them could be great. Some of them could be terrible. And you can learn stuff from all of that. It's as important to figure out what you don't like as what you do like as a singer. So track that song, see how those people do things differently. And if you do that step by step and compare those across the board, how those people might have taken liberties with the melody on the chorus 3, or they went up instead of down on the melody, or they changed the melody. Any of those kind of things are really important for you as a singer to learn why somebody does something like that, where they might do something, and figure out the bits and pieces that you like of each person's style that you could incorporate into your own. I had somebody in college told me once, if you steal from one person, it's plagiarism. If you steal from everyone, it's research.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yes, so I think that is an excellent way to start developing your own sound is to do what you're suggesting, Stephen, and that's listening to 5 different singers at least, how they're singing, listen carefully, listen to how they're singing, pick out the things you like about what they're singing and the things you don't like. And as you do this with different songs and different singers, you will definitely start assimilating this information, and that leads to the path of creating your own sound.
Let me jump back in and just also add one caveat. The thing that you don't want to do is try to mimic everybody's sound. We're all built differently. There's no way that that I'm going to sound like Adam Steffi singing a song. My voice doesn't do that, right? And if you contort yourself to make yourself sound like somebody else, you can do damage. You can also just build bad habits. What we want is for you to find your best sound, and that falls within your range. And you can copy stylistic things, but try not to copy the tone of somebody else. I guarantee none of us sounds like Alison Krauss on this Zoom call. And that's good. You know, you're going to be your own singer, and that's what you bring to the table. So just be careful of that.
Right, right. And in other words, do not try to alter the sound of your voice in a way that is unnatural to you, because it could very likely cause damage. And plus, that isn't the right way to finding your sound. You know, you mentioned Alison Krauss, and so I wanted to touch on another aspect of finding your own sound, and that is through emulation. And I believe that emulating is a tried and true way or stepping a path to finding your own sound, but you just don't want to get stuck in that emulation. And I want to tell a story that has to do with Alison Krauss. So one time I was invited to sit in a Volkswagen with the president of a record company, and he played a cassette. That's how long ago this was. He played a cassette for me, and he said, "I want you to hear this." And so I listened to the first song, and it was one of my songs that I had recorded, and it sounded just like me. I mean, I thought it was me, except there was something a little weird about it. And when the song was over, I looked at the record producer with a question on my face, and he said, "That isn't you, that's Alison Krauss." And then he played another song, and it was a Newgrass Revival song, and it was Alison Krauss singing just like John Cowan. She didn't sound like me anymore. She sounded like John Cowan, and then etc. So this is when her very early stages, where she was just learning to find her own voice, and so she did learn through emulation for sure. And you know, if you're a fan of hers and have listened to her through the years, you will hear the evolution of her voice. And she, you know, it's still ebbing and flowing and changing a little bit, but you'll find that she kind of has settled on a sound that she likes. And that was through, at least partially through emulation. You just have to drop the part where you sound just like the person. This is all a path to getting your own voice. And Dan, please.
But you know, this is something that so many, just about every musician does. You know, they go through this evolution. I love hearing the earliest recordings by artists because you can always hear their influences. Case in point, I'm kind of obsessed with George Jones, and my wife and I were listening to his early Starday stuff the other night, and you know, he was influenced by Lefty Frizzell and Hank Williams, and on that early cut, like the third song he ever recorded was called "For Sale or for Lease," and he's imitating Lefty Frizzell. And it sounds like this awful version of Lefty Frizzell. And then the next song, he's trying to sound like Hank Williams, and he's doing the little vocal yodels and kind of a back of the throat kind of thing. And then he even did Heartbreak Hotel, and he's kind of trying to sound like Elvis, and it's just weird. Ray Charles did that too. You know, when he first started, he was trying to emulate Nat King Cole, and the record labels almost dropped him. Like, we got to find your sound, Ray. And finally, he found it. Bill Monroe, when you listen back to the Monroe Brothers recordings of the 1930s, I played up at I played up in Rosine at the festival there one year. I think it was at Bill Monroe's 100th birthday party. And on the way home, I had a 5-hour drive home, and I just said, I think I'm just going to listen early on all the way through Bill Monroe's career and just see how far I get. So I listened to a few Monroe Brothers tunes, and then I started with the 1940 recordings. And you hear this person develop, like with each recording session, the 40 sessions, and then the 1945 session, and then when Flatt and Scruggs joined him in 46 and 47, those cuts. And then later when Jimmy Martin comes in, it changes, and it's so fascinating to hear how people evolve and grow. And you can do that too.
Exactly. Absolutely. My favorite example of that is one time I was driving and the song Blue Moon of Kentucky came on, sung by Elvis Presley. And this is one of his earliest, what was the name of that record company? Sun Record Company?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of his earlier recordings. And he sounded like Elvis Presley through the first verse. Then he hit the bridge and he sounded like Bill Monroe. Elvis Presley sounded just like Bill Monroe when he sang Blue Moon in Kentucky, and I almost drove off the road. It was exciting to hear that. But yes, we learn through emulation.
And instrumentalists do that as well. I mean, we all, if you're a guitar player, you probably wanted to pick like Doc Watson or Tony Rice, or if you were, all the banjo players wanted to sound like Earl Scruggs at some point. So it's kind of it's like the progression of an artist to imitate, emulate, just like we do as human beings when we learn to speak. We imitate our parents, we imitate our family, we pick up phrases, we pick up pronunciations, and then at some point you become your own speaker. You develop your own syntax for language. So it's just a fascinating evolution.
It is, absolutely. I wanted to say one thing before we moved on to the next subject, and that is that I think it's important. This question has come up, should we listen to the earlier recordings? Yes, we should listen to, whenever we're learning a song, if it's a traditional bluegrass song or a song that dates back, I think it is important to listen to the original recording. That may not be the one that you emulate, or that you want to adapt from, but you really want to hear where the song came from, and like I said, you may hear versions that were done later on that you like that are somewhat different from that original version, but I still think it's important for you to have heard that original version. Okay, so next, let's talk about another component of finding your voice, and that is, this is slippery subject. How do we put ourselves into a song? How do we sing with authenticity? What is authenticity? How do we become emotionally invested in a song? And I have some thoughts about that. But Stephen or Dan, do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. One of the I practice music with the idea that if it's not in here, it doesn't come out, right? It has to be inside somewhere. And for voice, for me, it's all about the song, once you get into the song. But in bluegrass, we tend to glaze over some of the meaning sometimes, especially in the traditional repertoire. And one of the first tunes that I always teach when I'm teaching this very topic in a vocal workshop is Blue Ridge Cabin Home. Okay, we all know it. It's in every jam session. It's like everybody knows the tune. But have you really stopped to look at what the song's about? What makes it special? What does it mean to you? Why would you want to sing that? And I think of the lyrics, there's a well-beaten path on this old mountainside. Who talks like that, right? That's fascinating. It's beautiful. where I wandered when I was a lad. All right, so we're reminiscing, we're thinking about that. And as you get deeper into those lyrics, thinking about yourself in that story. And as I'm singing, I'm kind of one of two ways. I usually have a film strip going on behind my eyeballs that is me in that character's life. And I sort of take it from my days singing in musicals or any of that kind of stuff, where you become a character. But for me, I need to look at the lyrics, develop my own character for that song, because I'm not the songwriter. I don't have the same perspective, life experience, any of that from the original people that wrote the tune. But there's something in that that I can see. Oh, I love those hills of old Virginia. From those Blue Ridge hills I did roam. Can you picture what those hills look like? The more that you can get into the actual lyrics of the song you're singing and kind of develop your own ideas about that, the more it's just going to come out of you anyways, because you will have processed it in a different way. One of the things I like to have folks do is the third grade book report. Okay, number one, what's the song about? What's the first verse about? What's the most important word in the chorus? What's the most important word of the whole song? I see my songwriter pals who are on this line nodding their heads, right? This all plays into it. We're trying to communicate a story to the listener, and it's not necessarily somebody else's story. It can be our story. That's why we're singing. One of the singers that not exactly in bluegrass, the country singer Leanne Womack fascinates me because she can sing about killing somebody and about loving somebody back to back, and it sounds like she wrote the whole thing, that it was her story, note for note. And I hope it wasn't. but that's what we need as singers. The really great singers, it just feels like the song fell out of their mouth, right? You look at somebody like Lester Flatt, he's just singing from the heart, right? He knows he wrote the songs mostly, but he's singing his story, and you just believe him because it's so natural. And that's what I'm after from singers. I want you to tell me the story, and whatever notes you use, whatever phrasing you use, kind of impacts that. But the more we think about story, the less we have to think about all that other stuff. If you're really thinking about whatever song you word, all right, the word sunshine's the most important one, you're going to lean on that heavier when you get to it because you're thinking it's the most important word. You don't have to think, all right, I need to pocket this one a little ahead of the beat or a little behind, or it's got to be louder or whatever. Those things sort of happen organically when the rest of it's working. But to me, it's all about getting inside the song and figuring out what makes that song tick. And, on a surface level, they're all just la, 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 right? But when you get into the craft of the songwriting, and maybe I'm a Pig Home in a Pen isn't the most intricate one, but there's room for that too.
Hey, now, I think it
Yeah,
resonates
that's
with
right.
I went
me.
to sleep and the hogs ate him.
I think you just
Maybe those are not the
insulted
heaviest, most detailed ones, but there
one
are
of
so
Dad's
many
family members.
beautifully crafted songs in our genre.
Atticus ran me over a fence the other day, so he got irritated with me. So yeah, I could use that the next time I sing "Pig in a Pen."
There you go.
Absolutely could. Absolutely.
Dede, could I add on to that a little bit?
Of course.
Um, uh, I like listening. Some of my favorite singers are the ones who just move me emotionally and have really convincing natural Southern accents. It just reminds me of everything bluegrass that I love. Sean Camp has got to be my favorite singer right now. He just, if you haven't heard Sean Camp, just go on YouTube and look up him singing "The Grandpa That I Know." There's one version of him on the radio. It's just one mic and his guitar, and see how he delivers that song. I mean, he's a wonderful songwriter to begin with, and there's all this imagery. And when he sings that song, man, I know people who have had grandpas like that, the way the song describes, feel that song. And so when you try to study somebody who delivers with emotion, you can look at technical stuff as well to try to understand what they're doing. It's like this balance of technical versus emotion. Like emotion without technique is not, because you can just holler stuff with emotion, but it might not, the listeners might not like it, or it might be really out of tune. And, people, you can be as emotional as you want, but people aren't going to like it. And then on the other hand, you can be so technical that you suck the life out of a song.
Right.
And so you listen to somebody like Sean or the great singers, and you learn about how they phrase. Like, do they forward phrase a little bit? One thing doing vocal workshops in the Midwest, where a lot of people have grown up in church choirs, you get everything on the beat. You get quarter, 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 half, quarter, quarter. Like everything is so, as my old voice teacher used to call it, sausage links of syllables, because everybody's trying to match the beat and sing along. And if you do that in a bluegrass song, you're not really doing you're not doing the things that the people who we've looked at as the great singers in bluegrass ever did. They didn't do it that way. So you can start with the technical aspects and the way people pronounce words. I have a student right now who's from Maine, and he's a good guitar player, and he is singing in a way that he's trying to imitate bluegrass singers. Rhythmically, he's got some pretty good stuff. His tendencies are he will emphasize downbeats whether or not the word is important or not. So he just gets in the groove and he hits words that are unimportant. And so we're trying to work on that. And also his pronunciation is just awful. He's trying to say, well, like sticking the tongue way out and doing weird pronunciations, trying to sound Southern. And so I'm pretty tough on him in his band class. I'll stop the band and say, quit. What are you saying? How do you pronounce that word? How do you say that word when you just speak it? And he'll go, oh, well. I say, okay, so why are you going well like that? I didn't know I was doing that. I'm like, well, you are. Record yourself and listen back. And I get tough with him, and they seem to like that. But as soon as he relaxes, the tension goes away here, and the tone gets better. He'll stop over singing. He'll stop punching. He's starting to think about, how does my voice sound, and how can I fit it into this style?
Yes. Very well said. Yes. So perhaps one aspect of what you just said, Dan, harkens back to when you're talking about the fact that, yes, knowing your song and knowing the lyrics and knowing it completely, plus technique is what's necessary to really authentically, perhaps in quote marks, deliver a song. And that kind of harkens back to what I said earlier, that vocal technique alone does not make a great singer. It's a way that frees us up from the physical technique, frees us up from the physical limitations that stand in the way of our ability to fully express ourselves. And I would like to back up to what Stephen was saying. Stephen, many of the things that you were saying are exactly the same things that I say to my student. So just to reiterate, every song that you sing is a story. Perhaps your first responsibility is to know that story, read it for the story or the poem that it is, and know it. Pay attention to the feelings and the images that come up. If it's a song about a coal miner, you may never have been a coal miner, but you may in your life have experienced moments where you feel you're in the dark, or you're feeling stressed and alone. And so you can use the subject matter metaphorically to infuse the song with some feeling. So if you learn your song, know it inside and out, have the imagery, pay attention to the feelings that arise while you're learning the song. That has a lot to do with singing the song with authenticity. And the last thing I want to say about that is that it's so important to really, really know the song inside and out, because if you don't, you're going to be thinking. And the minute you start thinking, you're not really expressing. It's like thinking cancels spontaneity to a certain extent. So you want to know it well enough so you're not thinking, and so you have a level playing field to take over instinctively, so to speak. Yeah.
I would say also one of the things that you might work on with your voice instructor is separating lyrics from the song. And so one thing that Dede just said in reading it as a poem, taking it away from the tonality of what's going on and the rhythm, but just looking at it as words on a page. But the converse is also true. Using neutral syllables that are easy for you to sing to learn how to navigate the song itself. And so taking the words away, a lot of times our big mishaps come when we're trying to pronounce a word and we're doing it in a weird way, as Dan said. And so if you can take the lyrics away from the tune, learn the tune in your key, in your voice, with your ah vowel or e or whatever you're working on, whatever works best in your voice, get that all going, and then reapply the words to that. I have the students, use their neutral syllable on the first phrase and then go into lyrics for the second phrase, or keep alternating until it feels the same for both, and that's when they're really working well. So don't, as you're singing, practicing singing, if you keep hitting a wall on a particular spot, try to remove some obstacles. So take the lyrics out of the path. Maybe it truly is that it's in the wrong key, all those kind of things, but feel free to separate lyrics and the music itself in a way to get your voice used to one, used to the other, and then marry the two.
Very well said once again. I would also like, a thought just occurred to me that's not exactly related to what we're talking about here, but it's something that I run into all the time. You don't want to sing a song in the same key another singer sang it in, just because it's in the key that the singer sang it in. You sing a song in the key that is right for you. Our voices are all different.
Say that again for folks, please.
Do not sing a song in the same key as another singer sung it, just for the reason of because the other singer sang it in that key. We never sing a song in the key that is not right in a key that is not right for us. Our voice will dictate what key we should sing a song in. Yes, and through vocal technique, you can expand your range and perhaps move the key up a little bit, but you still have to honor the key that works for you.
I'll add to that. It is a kind thing to try not to be between general jam keys, especially. I assume most of our listeners here are jam folks, and you certainly don't want to walk into your local jam session with a key in F sharp or any of the peculiar keys, but your G, C, D, normal stuff. Usually a half step one way or the other is not massively critical, so try to be easy. If it's you for your band, pick the right key.
So I'm gonna call you out, Mojo.
Yes.
Now I agree with you. Becky Buller and I, for 5 years backstage, did "Wall Around My Heart" in A flat, and when it came out, it was in G, and I was so discouraged.
And it wasn't because of her.
Because the other ones couldn't cut it.
No, honestly, the reason was that's a duet with her and Jim Lauderdale, and the alternate key. Where does it go? Is it the 5 or the 4? I forget. Whatever it was.
4, yeah.
It goes to okay. So he could do it in C, but not D flat. He couldn't. Jim couldn't sing it in D flat. So that's where the compromise lay on that one. But yeah, totally. I mean, we had that conversation in detail because Becky sounded a little better in A flat.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was one of those, hey, this is the product we're trying to do, and we definitely didn't want to go A flat to C.
Yeah, that would be a little weird.
Exactly. So, anyways, so you're right. You're right to call me out on that, but there's more at play here.
Concede to the guest. The
Yeah,
guest
yeah. I
artist.
mean, you can't tell Jim Lauderdale what key to sing something in. He knows.
That's right. So let me make this very clear. If you are in a band and you are singing a song, you get to pick the key that the song is in. Period. In fact, Bill Monroe told that very thing to Alice Gerard and Hazel Dickens. He told them, "You sing it in the key that's good for you." There you go. So let's move on and let's share some vocal tips and some short, impactful, perhaps, techniques that might help our singers who are tuned in today. And maybe I'll start with that. And so here's something I think that goes a long way, and that is releasing your jaw when you sing. Now, why do we need to release the jaw? We need to release the jaw for this reason. We have big muscles that some of them connect even back into the neck that crisscross down across your jaw and across your vocal folds. Across your larynx, and your vocal folds are part of your larynx, which is right about here. And I want to show you something. Why don't you all take your fingers like this, put them on your larynx right about here, and tighten your jaw, and really tighten it, your lower jaw. Now try to move your larynx from side to side. It might feel a little icky, but try to move it from side to side, and you'll feel that it's very stiff. Your vocal folds are in there, right? Now let go of your jaw. Let it drop down and back a little bit. And now move your larynx. And you feel it's so much more mobile. And therefore your vocal folds are they're much freer to vibrate and to stretch. The vocal folds need to be free and supple. And the other thing I want to say about that is that I don't know how many people out there know this, but the higher you sing, the more you need to release your lower jaw and let it drop down a little bit. It's incremental, small increments, but it needs to drop down and back. And the higher you sing, the more the jaw drops. And so thus the pictures you see of Bill Monroe, or you may have seen him in person do this when he's singing a really high note, he's like this, right? So the jaw drops because it helps to open the throat. But this is the thing I wanted to tell you. The jaw doesn't drop from here. The jaw drops from here. There's a hinge up here. So whenever you're dropping your jaw when you sing, remember that it's dropping from there. So if I sang, "Sweetheart of mine, can't you hear me calling?" My jaws, "Sweetheart of mine, can't you hear me calling?" It's loose the whole time. As you ascend in pitch, it may firm up a little bit, but the main point here is that your jaw, you get a lot of bang for the buck if you release that lower jaw and keep it supple. Okay, that's my tip.
I'll add to that. That's all exactly right, and it's something I've struggled with for years. I actually have a underbite, and so I used to sing like this, kind of up at everything. So I really have to focus on trying to come over the top of the notes this way and unhinging. One of the things that worked for me is really actually sticking my fingers in that space and just sort of reminding myself that the jaw is loose. And so as I'm singing, working at home, oh, I love those hills of old Virginia, just keeping that whole thing nice and loose. And I really even kind of move it around and do silly stuff to do that. Another thing is taking my hand like this. Everybody try this. And then bring it right back here so that you sort of keep your jaw from going forward, and you can kind of keep it down. You're not trying to force anything. Force is always the wrong move. But that same Oh, I love those hills. And you can just keep tabs on what's going on so you're not crunching, you're not clenching all of this stuff up. Jaw is an issue for almost every singer I work with.
Correct. Correct. And Dan, what would you like to contribute?
There's two things. In terms of posture, which is home base for everybody. I mean, we could go through and do posture, feet to get, shoulder width apart, knees not locked, pelvis in line with the body. But the most important one is the rib cage. And there are two words. If you don't remember anything about posture, remember that the rib cage should be elevated and expanded. Elevated and expanded rib cage. So I'll stand up here. Maybe you can see me. So there's a couple different ways to elevate and expand the rib cage. One is whenever you breathe in, air goes in, there has to be some sort of physical displacement, right? So when air goes in, the rib cage, which is elastic, elevates and expands. And then when you relax, the rib cage goes back into a relaxed position, but not elevated anymore. The other way to elevate and expand the rib cage is by using the intercostal muscles to simply elevate and expand your rib cage. And then what happens is if you use that energy to elevate and expand the rib cage, when you breathe in and out, the displacement doesn't occur here anymore, it occurs low. And that's what we call diaphragmatic breathing. However, I never use the word diaphragm with any of my voice students because usually if you tell somebody, sing from your diaphragm, they just sing louder and it doesn't fix anything. So we talk about elevating and expanding the rib cage. And one way you can find that, you can all do this, is you bring your arms out to the side like this, and you feel how there's a lot of distance between the base of your rib cage and your pelvic bone, and bring your arms back down to the sides and keep that elevation and expansion. And that will fix a lot of things. You can still maintain that elevated and expanded rib cage when you play guitar or banjo or anything else. One of the problems with posture, as soon as you put an instrument on, it kind of pulls you forward and you lose your good posture. I don't have a guitar here with me, but one thing that I sometimes will do, I'll keep my rib cage elevated and expanded. I'll bring the guitar over to the side and play this way to where it's not on my belly and it's not pulling me into bad posture. So I can still maintain good posture and still play my rhythm here at the side. Just a little bit. You don't have to contort too much to make that happen. And the other thing I'd want to talk about is intonation. Most listeners, even if they don't know what to listen for in terms of whether a singer is good or bad, if intonation is really bad, people will just go, oh, that doesn't sound good. And even if they can't identify what it is. And so one rule to remember, one little trick to remember is for most of us, we tend to sing a little flat. There's about, it's just a broad percentage I've come up with, probably 80% of people sing a little flat. Maybe 10% of people, sometimes people with higher voices, seem to sing a little sharp if they're going to be out of tune. And then there's this very small percentage of people who are just amazing and just right on the money anytime they sing. But we're kind of fighting gravity all the time. And so if you tend to sing a little under pitch or flat, you should think about your ascending intervals as being very large. So when you're going from like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, our tendency will be not to go high enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm exaggerating. So if you think of those steps as being very big, it's going to give you the energy and kind of the visualization to stay up on the pitch. And then as you descend in pitch, a lot of times what we do with gravity's pulling us down is we'll go too far. We'll go, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we end up way far away from our tonal center. So if you think about those intervals as being very tiny, very small steps as you descend, That's going to help you to maintain a good tonal center. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So those are a couple little tricks.
That's a great point.
Nice.
Thank
I,
you. Yeah, I like
I've got
that.
a couple thoughts on just to add on to what you're talking about, Dan. Um, the first one, or I'll go backwards on your last one. One of the things I do for intonation, I try to have people think about darts. Think about a dartboard and the trajectory of a dart to actually hit the center. It's never at the center. It's always slightly from above, right? Anytime it actually hits. So I like to think as we're going doing any sort of exercise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I feel like I'm coming slightly down on any of the ascending stuff. So or not down, but like I'm coming from the top. Does that make sense? Coming over the top, and that allows things to be brighter and more full, and more perceived overtone, undertone stuff. Just another way of kind of thinking the same thing you're talking about. The other thing is, I highly recommend in your rehearsal space, there's a couple things you must have. One of them is a mirror. You got to look at yourself. And I was watching Dan as he did his exercise and showing great breathing technique. If you are in front of a mirror, you could tell there's one little wrinkle that can happen when you're doing all that, and that's the shoulders. If your shoulders come up, bad things happen, right? So if you're looking in a mirror, you can see that. The other thing is, as you're looking in a mirror, you can prevent some of the odd pronunciation things because your face contorts and you don't want to look like that anyways. Your body will just kind of stop you from doing a lot of it.
Absolutely.
Really odd, crunchy muscle stuff. So
Would
I
you do
highly
that again,
recommend.
Stephen? Do that again. Yeah, I was
Yeah, thank
very
you.
effective.
Thank you.
We have now 97 participants. We were up to 105. I think that
I
face.
know. Sorry,
Man.
but a mirror is super important. And some way to have music stands are not expensive, and what they do is they get your lyrics up at face level, so you're not doing this while you're, you want to have your music stand up where you can see it and work on things. You need to have a mirror nearby. Those are two pretty inexpensive things that I would say are absolutely required for a rehearsal space.
Wonderful. Exactly. So what I'm going to do is, I just want to say one thing, and then what I want to do is, since we're running out of time, I want to leave some time for questions. And so I think if you two don't mind, I'm just quickly going to tick through some thoughts on caring for the voice so that we can move on to questions. But before that, I wanted to say that it's important to practice singing standing up. Practice your technique standing up, because when you're standing up, you're in alignment. And that makes all the difference. Your posture and your alignment makes all the difference in your singing. So moving on to vocal health, this webinar is being recorded, so I'm just going to tick through these things, and then you can listen to the recording if you don't feel you had enough time to dwell on each point. So let me just say this, in terms of vocal health and caring for your voice and avoiding injury, speaking loudly or frequently may lead to a voice disorder. Repeatedly clearing your throat or coughing may damage vocal fold tissue. So if you got a chronic cough, that's going to affect your voice. And if you just habitually cough, that's going to affect your voice. You should go see a doctor if you've got a cough going on for longer than 2 weeks. Caffeine and alcohol dry out your vocal folds. If you're going to drink alcohol before you sing, think of it as 1 part alcohol and 2 parts water, because that'll counteract the dehydration aspect of caffeine and alcohol. Antihistamines can dry out the vocal folds. The vocal folds have a mucosal lining, and that allows them to vibrate freely without chafing. So it has this they have a natural mucosal lining, and if that lining dries out, then your vocal folds will start to chafe and will be uncomfortable and possibly lead to problems. And so again, antihistamines dry out your vocal cords and your throat. So make sure that you're drinking plenty of water. Stay hydrated. And here's an important point. You know, if your vocal folds feel tired or swollen or uncomfortable, none of the products that you can get for the vocal folds themselves, like Slippery Elm for singers or Singer's Saving Grace, none of those really work for the vocal folds because they don't touch the vocal folds. They don't get anywhere near the vocal folds. They can help to soothe your throat. The only thing that's going to help your vocal folds is steam. I use a Vicks facial steamer. You know, sometimes if my voice isn't feeling good, and that directly provides humidity to the vocal folds. Or you can stand in your shower, a hot shower for a while, or you can get some boiling water in a pot and lean over it. Don't burn yourself, and put a towel over that and create humidity to soothe your vocal folds. Getting enough sleep, of course, makes a big difference with singing. Do you all have anything you really want to add to that you feel?
Yeah. You know, one of the things that nobody talks about is professional musicians traveling in a van or a bus or an airplane or whatever. And number one, you're sort of sitting hunched over, so you're not elevated and expanded and breathing well. And you're talking all day. And you get to the gig, and then it's hard to sing, and you wonder why. But it's because we're using the same tool all day long. So you'll see a lot of really professional singers that don't really hang out or even communicate with their other band members. If they have to sing night after night after night, you know, Sam's actually kind of that guy. He'll go straight to a hotel room. He won't really hang out, because he's also story man, and he'll tell lots of stories if he's hanging out. So in an effort to be able to sing that night, he'll just remove himself from the situation and not speak with poor vocal technique. That's a big thing. And you know, the whole moisture thing is crazy important. Keeping yourself hydrated is really a challenge when you're playing and singing all the time.
Right, exactly. Dan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Rest and water, drinking lots of water and getting lots of rest. And I was, if I was going to say something, it would have been exactly what Stephen said. You know, I like to talk when I'm on the road, and man, it'll wear you out. And, you know, we teach a lot of camps, vocal camps or guitar camps or whatever. And man, I know by Thursday and Friday, my voice is shot.
Exactly.
Because, you know, you kind of have to try to be measured in how much you talk. And a lot of times, instead of eating dinner with people, I'll try to find some place off by myself so I don't have to talk. And people might think I'm being rude, but really you need your voice. And especially if you're performing on the Thursday night or the Friday night, it's usually tough.
That's good to hear that from you. So I'm not the only one. Yeah, exactly. Worn out. I usually I take a little humidifier with me when I travel and use it at night just to help my voice a little bit. So I'd like to move on to questions now, but before that, I wanted to say that, and I haven't mentioned this to you, Dan or Stephen, but you know, the three of us are pretty busy people, but you can have us for an extended weekend vocal workshop if you provide the venue and the accommodations and everything else isn't, you know, acceptable. We would love to do that. And also you can have any of us individually as well if you would like to add us to your camp or festival or workshop scene. I also wanted to mention that I have a vocal school of voice on Peghead Nation. And Lee, I was wondering, did you have that little flash? Yeah, here we go. And so for those of you who don't really know of a teacher, this course will teach you the fundamentals of good vocal technique. And it's at Peghead Nation is a wonderful online school, a roots music school. There are lots of other wonderful, wonderful teachers on Peghead Nation as well. Okay, so let us move on to questions. We'd love to answer your questions.
There were a
So,
number of them already in the chart, but
yeah, I've kind of been writing herd over those, and let me feed them to you. What kind of guidelines can you give for vocal blending and balance, which sounds like harmony vocals to me?
Lee, could you close out that document?
And
There we go. Okay.
could I start on that one? I have a friend here named Amy Clay Goldfarb, who Nate Lee produced a record for her back in November, and I was just hired to do the harmony vocals over the last few weeks. I did them from home. You know, when you're doing harmony vocals, you're really an artisan. You're not as much of an artist, because I think of the lead vocalist as the artist delivering. And as an artisan, it's my job to be more like a chameleon. I need to listen to how she pronounces her words. She lives in California. She doesn't sound like me. And so I had to really pay attention the way she phrased. She tended, anecdotally, she tended to phrase earlier than I would naturally. So I had to pay close attention to that. She tended to cut off things faster than I would. So I had to modify the way I would sing to cut off with her. She did some really cool like runs that are not necessarily bluegrassy runs, but a little more maybe pop or R&B type things that I had to learn how to harmonize with those. Pronunciation was a big thing. I wanted to try to match what she did. And then nicely, she had good expression. Sometimes she was really digging in and getting like a little gritty, and then sometimes it was real wispy and soft. And so there was this dynamic and tone and airiness that sometimes I had to try to match as a harmony singer. So Amy, if her record will be out soon, so be looking for Amy Clay and her record. I think she's still on here.
Yeah. You know, that makes me think of something. It's actually a point, but I think it's so important I want to mention it. And that has to do with articulation. Articulation is important for several reasons. One is that why bother singing a song? If a song is a story and the primary reason for singing is to communicate a story, it doesn't do your listener any good if they can't understand the words. So it's very important to articulate. And sometimes I have to talk my students into it because they just don't feel like articulating or for whatever reason. And the other thing is that when we're articulating, we're also shaping our vowels. The better we shape our vowels, the better tone quality that we get if we're shaping them the right way. And so here's a tip for articulation, and that is pretend that your listeners are deaf and that they have to lip read. And if they can understand what you're singing by lip reading, then you know you're articulating enough. Okay.
I'll add that the blend thing to what Dan said. It's all about when you're singing harmony. It's not about how you sound. It's about how the artist sounds. Whoever the lead singer is, they make all the rules. You really have to pay attention to all the vowel shape. You have to pay attention to the length of their consonants, making sure that, everything aligns exactly with what they're doing, and that you're not swamping their vocal. So I
Right.
always try to sing back from them just a little bit, regardless of which part I'm singing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, any other questions?
Oh, yes. So I had to check twice to make sure that I didn't actually type this one in, but no, someone else did. And this is asking for advice about teaching or helping others who cannot hear or carry a tone or tune.
Okay. So the first thing is before you even take voice lessons, I would say you have to work on ear training. And there are teachers who are very good at that, and they teach using a drone. So you have a drone going in one key, and then you can hear your voice in relationship to that drone, and that helps with ear training. So that's my feeling, that it's hard to get very far with vocal technique if you're dealing with a real pitch problem right off the bat. And the first thing to do is to get some pitch training, not necessarily ear training, that's something different, but pitch training. Thoughts on that, Dan or Stephen?
Wanting to be good at anything is like a combination of aptitude, which we might say natural ability or tendency, things that come easy to us, versus putting in time and effort. And good practice, good focused practice, not just singing through something, but actually like listening critically, as Dede's talking about, like developing tonal center and singing along with pitch. It really depends on your goal. Like if you decide that you want to record with Stephen Mougin at his studio there and do your own recording, you're going to want to work. You're going to want to put the time into it. Whether you have the aptitude, and it might not be as easy for you. But when I have students here, I'll say, here's the task at hand, here's the job, and for one person, it might take 10 minutes for them to figure it out, and they've got it. For someone else, it might take 2 days of 6 hours a day practicing. In the end, if you know what your goal is, you kind of know where the arrival point is, and it might take longer for you. And then you have to decide, like, is that where I want to put my time? I learned when I was a kid that I really liked basketball and baseball and stuff, but it didn't come easy to me, and I wanted to put my time towards my music. But anybody can sing, right? Because we all have a voice. So it just depends on what your expectations are for being a singer. If you want to sing in church, if you want to sing a nursery lullaby to your kid, if you want to sing well enough to write a song and be able to sing it to someone else, there's all sorts of levels of singing, and we tend to set the bar too high, I think, when it comes to expressing ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. We might have time for one more question.
I think, yeah, one more question, then we'll need to wrap it up. And that is, do you have any advice for international bluegrass singers? What they should or shouldn't do if they're at sort of a beginner level of English?
That's a good question. A beginning level of English. Well, I have heard international bluegrass singers sound exactly, they just, especially, I mean, like Japanese bands that I've heard, their singing sounds, they just learned the words phonetically and sing with a perfect American accent. But I think that we have to follow the same rules of how to learn voice. And in bluegrass music, you want to learn, if you want to have a bluegrass sound, the things to look for are ornamentation and phrasing and timing. And if you've got those elements, if you're working on those elements, that's great. Even if your voice, you don't have an American accent. I think that, like I said, the ornamentation, the bluegrass ornamentation, the timing and the phrasing, if you work on that, then you're good.
I think it's also important to identify the sounds that your language may or may not have that American English does. And I know TH is not a thing that a lot of languages have, which we have a lot of. Whether, all that stuff. The idea of sticking your tongue through your teeth and making a sound is not common with a lot of languages. So spending some time identifying that and then really, really practicing it until it's not a really awkward thing for you to do. And then exactly phonetically, I think, is really the way to do it. Learn the sound of the words even necessarily before you learn what the words are. And I go back to my classical training in college. It's exactly the same thing. If you're singing Italian, you know what those letters sound like, and then you got to go figure out what the song's about. So I think it's sort of a similar approach.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And perhaps the bottom line is that if you're singing with expression and you have enough technique so that the sound is what you want it to be, then those are the most important things. And even if your accent, it's not an American accent, as long as you've got you're expressing, you're being expressive, and you can understand what you're saying.
Well, thank you so much. I think we've reached the end of our time and a little bit more, so we probably should wrap it up here. I want to thank Dede for putting together this fantastic workshop. We had a great showing of people, and Dan and Stephen, thank you so much. Very interesting. I've taken like tons of notes for myself and be contacting at least some of you, and again, to work on my vocals. Thank you again. And the recording for this will be available on the IBMA YouTube channel. Usually it takes a day or so to get it up, but we will do that.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Lee. And thank you, everybody who joined us today. We're so glad you're here.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.